Hey, thanks a lot, Matt. I appreciate it. My name's John Miller. I'm an entertainment attorney by day. At night, I put out some independent records on a local label called Wednesday Records, and we're here today for the music and licensing panel, otherwise known as how you afford to get off your couch and into an apartment as a musician by licensing your music through film and television. We have a great panel here today. We're really lucky to have this panel here in Santa Barbara. I'm going to go and introduce each one of them and then let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do. But to my right here is Mike Locke. Mike is the owner of Silverside Productions, which is a music supervision company down in Los Angeles. Before that, Mike used to work for Rhino and deal with the Warner Brothers and Atlantic catalogs, placing those songs and dealing with those clearances. To his right is Tavi Shebestari, and she works with BMI. You may have heard of BMI before, and she it's a performing rights organization and deals with artist relations there at BMI, and she'll be telling you a little bit about that. To Tavi's right is Bud Carr. Bud Carr is an industry veteran in music supervision, has worked on major films, supervising those films, including films like Terminator, Natural Born Killers, many, many films that you've heard of over the years. He has done it all and plays music in those films. We're very happy to have him here with us today. And all the way to his right is Greg Danielson. And Greg is the owner of Go Big Entertainment. Greg is also a longtime music supervisor in the business, currently working on shows like Teen Mom, 16 and Pregnant, placing all the music in those songs. He's also done a lot in the alternative sports area over the years, working with companies like bands and the like. So we have a great group of people here today that are going to be able to answer all your questions. Just to get a little background for us, by a show of hands, how many people have ever had a song in this room placed into a film or television episode or have dealt with a music license? Okay. How many people here, and just by a show of honesty, don't know very much about music licensing? That's okay, because that's what we're here to do today, is educate. All right, great. So that gives us an idea of how we can direct our program here today. The last thing I'd say is what we'll hope to do is just go through maybe a half hour of questions that I'll be asking these folks, and then leave about 15 minutes at the end for your questions, because that's important that you get your questions answered here today. So thanks for getting up early. Thanks for getting your coffee in you and being here. I think it's going to be fun. So why don't we start, just go down the row and let you each introduce yourself one more time and tell a little bit more about what you do. Mike?
Sure. Okay. As John mentioned, I was at Warner Music Group about 5.5 months ago. Recently left to continue doing really what I was doing and had the pleasure of doing through Warner Music Group, and that was working with a lot of independent labels and artists for licensing. Previously, I had plugged them into Warner's licensing team and was representing them for licensing opportunities. So actually, my clients are people like these people at the end of the table and others, and the labels and artists that I represent looking out for licensing opportunities. We can talk about the various deals and how we represent artists. And then with Silverside Productions, which is the new venture, we are also a publishing company and look out for licensing opportunities for the artists I work with in film, TV, commercials, video games, and the like. That's it in a nutshell.
That's a great little nutshell. I work at BMI, and like it was said earlier, I work on the artist relations side. And just to kind of say it in a very simple way, you know, BMI is a performing rights organization. That means we collect and distribute the performance royalty to the songwriters and music publishers whose music was actually used. Now, how it particularly relates to you and this panel is that actually happens to be one of the ways that you get paid, which is when your music is licensed and played on television, because that's one of the avenues that counts. For example, I in particular work more with writers and music publishers and really try to facilitate creative opportunities, practical opportunities in whatever way that I can be helpful. So that's what I do.
Cool. I'm a user. This is not an AA meeting, but that's basically my background. Started as a performer, and then as an agent, and then as a personal manager, and then in the late 80s got asked to help a film director and producer get music cleared, because in those days, quite frankly, the clearance end of it, the people in the business who did it for a living knew as much about licensing as you do. You'd call a record label and ask them to license a recording, and they go, "We'll get back to you." And they'd have to go look at their files and figure out what to do. So what's happened over the years is professionals are now in the business and understand how to work with artists and record labels and publishers to get it to a point, if I'd like to use your song in a movie, I can actually get the rights and give it to the film company or television company that I'm working with to do. So it's, there is a creative side to what we do and kind of trying finding songs, but there's a practical side to it on the business level of making sure that songs copywritten, Actually, there's an agreement between the 5 guys in the band about who gets what. And hopefully we get it done and get it in there and get it used and we get to become famous.
All true. I'm also a user.
It is an AA meeting.
It is.
You guys push the mics forward a little bit, it's a little hard to hear in the back.
Can you turn that light? Yeah, do we need the light? How good are your lenses, guys? Nothing personal, but kind of feel like it isn't.
I know, I'm on the spot right now.
We're working on the light. Like you were saying, my company does a bunch of different stuff for MTV and companies like Vans and Billabong and Red Bull and and we're, I think, more on like the high volume of licensing, just because we license so many songs, and it is like what Bud was saying, is like so important to be able to know that those songs are going to be clearable and they're fine and there are agreements in place and everything, and because we're on such a high volume and it's a lot of independent artists, half the time it's like a lot of detective work, making sure that all this stuff is shored up. So, but yeah, it's basically just sorting through thousands and thousands of songs every week and finding stuff appropriate for our clients, and it is a great job.
I'm going to jump around with questions today. So why don't I start with, since we're with you, Fred, who ultimately decides whether a song gets used in a film or television show? It's your job.
Yeah, that's a lot of times as supervisors, we're in the edit bay or we're dealing directly with the directors, producers, whoever. We go throughout. I mean, there's a whole wide gamut of that with a movie. Sometimes someone's just feeding you songs, go clear these, and they already know where they want them. Sometimes they need you to pick every song and go clear them. It's all over the place. With TV, with a lot of stuff that we're doing, if we have 40 or 50 cues in an episode, honestly, a lot of times editors are grabbing stuff from bins that we make for them that fit like the overall vibe of the show, and then we'll go in and kind of massage it and put in like the big vocal up songs and that kind of stuff. So it really comes down to the supervisor in most cases, but ultimately it's the producer and director.
Mike, what kind of deadlines are you working on typically when you're trying to clear music?
That totally ranges. If it's a commercial, it can be a quicker, tight deadline, and they can change directions in a second. And suddenly, from wanting kind of hip indie band, go and suddenly they've licensed Kanye West. They're schizophrenic in the commercial world. Films, it varies. Bud can address that. And TV shows, I think it varies. But I try and have quick turnarounds and clearances from getting the permissions from the publisher if there's a publisher involved, or making sure the publisher does their job, and then the artist management. From a couple days to a couple weeks. You guys have
Well,
anything?
like Greg was saying, it depends a lot. From my standpoint, I want to make sure that if an editor or a director or a producer of a show has said, I like this song by that artist, that it's coming from a reputable place, that I know that if it does get embedded in that show where more and more people like it, that eventually we can get it. So oftentimes you want to make sure that the material that's been selected either by the editors or that it's all available. So that's an important end of it for us, because you can find yourself in a situation, and it happens probably more in film than it does in television, where some picture editor or director comes back from China, with a song that they found on a tape somewhere in a bar, and they love it. Great. Name that tune. So, and that becomes, as he was saying, it becomes a lot of detective work. And it's not that you don't take some satisfaction in being a detective and finding things, but I think you'd much prefer to know that what you have you can use.
Maybe we can elaborate on that a little bit so that people understand when you guys are trying to do your job to clear all the rights in a song. Is everyone here familiar with the different rights we have? Maybe, Tavi, you could speak a little bit with the different kinds of rights that you deal with or the royalties that you collect for the Performing Rights Organization.
Yeah, I mean, I guess on a very fundamental level, when you have a song, there's two sides of it. You have the mechanical royalty and you have the performance royalty. And on a very basic way to understand it, the mechanical royalty has to do with the actual sale of the record. You're touching it, it's tangible, you can feel it. That is what the mechanical royalty is. And that has nothing to do with BMI, and we don't pay on that or distribute on that. But the performance royalty is the other half of that. And that has to do with representing both the songwriters and publishers of that particular work, because there's a performance royalty attached to that song. And when you, and by the way, this might be a little bit too much too quickly, but when you write a piece of music, you are intrinsically the writer of the song and you are the music publisher of the song. So you own both sides of that coin. You own the songwriter share and you own the music publisher share, which then has the mechanical royalty and the performance royalty. And then for us, and how it relates to this and getting your music licensed is whenever your music is licensed, let's say a music supervisor says, you know, to X band, we want to use your music, we want to use it in this way, and this is how much we want to pay you up front. But then you also are entitled to the back end, and the back end is that performance royalty, and that's where BMI comes in and pays you that back end royalty every time that song actually airs on television. And then to go one step further, which I'm sure you guys are curious, how in God's name do you track all that? And the way that it's tracked is by a cue sheet. And a cue sheet is created and generated by the music supervisor or the production company that then submits to BMI and says, we used, you know, X band for, you know, this however long, and we used it this many times. And they submit that to us, and then that's how we know, you know, what was used, when it was used, how it was used, and then we can pay accordingly. I don't know if you guys want to add.
That was an excellent description, and she's speaking specifically to
Right.
the songwriting composition side. So then on the flat fee license that happens to one of these gentlemen for their shows or films is you represent, or in my case, I have a recording, and the question is, do I represent the master recording and the publishing, or is there a publisher involved? So there's that two sides in general, and then Tavi broke up the composition side. Hopefully we're not adding layers of complexity here, but to license a song to a film or TV show or to anything, to grant those rights, the supervisor, production company needs to have the clearance rights to the recording, which is typically owned by the record label or who put forth the money for that recording. A lot of times if you guys are recording in your bedrooms, then you own the master recording. So that's one component, half of the license fee typically. And then there's the composition clearance, which is the publishing side. So think of the Beatles, EMI, Capitol Records, they own the recording. That's the license fee for the master recording. And then the publishing needs to be separately cleared. Is it a Lennon-McCartney song or is it a George Harrison song? That's the composition side. And what Tavi broke down was that composition side. Within the composition, then, you have the two components,
Right.
songwriter share and publishing share. And then there's an upfront flat fee license. Maybe it's a Beatles song and it's several $100,000 or whatever for the recording and for the publishing. And then if that is on a TV show and it gets aired repeatedly, cue sheet was properly filled out on that composition side, publishing side. The more that TV show airs, the more revenues or performance royalties are owed for that, which BMI collects.
So I think that was an excellent explanation, Mike.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, right, exactly. I think this is important, so if you don't mind,
There will be a test.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to spend a little bit more time just following up on this point because I think this is a fundamental place where songwriters and artists are trying to figure out how do we get compensated, right? Like we made a song. We just sat in Pro Tools or on Logic in front of my computer. I made a song. How do I get it from there? What are all these rights you guys are talking about at this point, and making clear that I understand it? So just so we're all clear, right? All these rights we're talking about come from the copyrights that are developed in the song initially, right? So when you guys are dealing with all these different performance rights and mechanical rights, these are all part of copyrights that exist at the time that you create the song, right? That's sort of what you guys are dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Well, and I'm dealing with the master recording rights.
Right, which get translated out to the record company, right?
Right.
Exactly. So, so once the artist, if the artist doesn't have a record deal, do you guys work with unsigned artists? Is that something you typically do?
Sure.
Prefer to.
Okay. And so at that point, typically the artist can clear all the rights that they have in the song, right?
Typically.
Okay.
It's an important thing, and you know, I've had kids of mine who've been in bands and then friends in bands and stuff. It's really important when you decide that you're gonna be in a band or be an artist or do something, that if there's two of you, you know, sit down and say, okay, we're gonna split this. If there's three of you, I mean, just actually sit down and have those conversations. Because at some particular point, what you've created, you hope, is gonna earn you money. So have those difficult kind of conversations immediately, you know, just kind of figure it out. Because eventually, if somebody decides to offer you $100, which, you know, quite frankly, you know, I know some bands who take $100 to do something, and somebody may offer, you know, does somebody get $25, or does somebody get $50, or did I write the lyrics? Or, take the time, and quite frankly, I'm going to volunteer. You can call BMI.
Yes.
And, you know, anybody in this room, BMI, I will plug ASCAP for this. I mean, you can actually pick up the phone or email them, and they will give you guidance on that basic element of stuff. That's why they're in the business. And so, if you're shy, don't be in this business. Call.
Definitely.
And so once the band, let's just say you have a band of 3 members, and they want to license a song, and they all own the song. You need all 3 of those folks to sign off on the license deal, right? That's why they have to have an agreement typically, correct?
Yep.
You want to see, so when you're in a band and you're coming forward to these guys, it's your expectation that, or your hope that these people already have their agreements in place and they're able to clear everything that you need?
Nah. No, it's true.
Well, yeah, I mean, the license does say, they rep and warrant that everything is, you know,
Yeah.
taken care of on their end.
But you don't have to have a publishing company.
Yeah.
You know, you can be, you know, Susie, Paul, and Frank, and call BMI and, you know, become Susie, Paul, and Frank, you know, and you split it up equally, and you can sign both sides of it, and we'll send you a check. You know, so what you do with it from there is important, but for me, it's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, exactly. No, and we've dealt with so many bands at that level where we kind of guide them towards a BMI or other PROs or whoever, that, you know, it's how important it is to go sign up with those companies if you are going to actually license songs, or if it gets gets a use. You definitely want them to follow up and take care of that stuff. More currently, I think people are more educated on it, but, you know, when I was doing like Viva La Bam on MTV, I was dealing with punk bands. They were just like, oh, I don't trust those guys, BMI or ASCAP. I'm not signing up with anybody, and they basically missed out on any or other revenue from that. So now it is very important to make sure you shore up all that stuff.
Greg, elaborate on that if you don't mind. Specifically, so, you know, if you license a song, there might be an upfront synchronization fee, right, that you pay?
Yeah, exactly. So like with like an MTV show, again, I was talking about the quantity of songs we use, so we don't really have big budgets. So do like a $500 license, let's say. That's $500 all in, which means $250 for the master recording, $250 for the publishing side. However, that's all split up between the indie band or one guy. That's up to them. And then hopefully they've already, like I said, signed up with a BMI or I think basically BMI, ASCAP, or CSAC. And then once that, you know, then, you know, what, a year and a half later, MTV will pay him, you know, and then you'll see, you know, performance royalties once the cue sheets are submitted and it gets into the system. I think it takes a good like 3 quarters for that stuff to start showing up, right?
Yeah, we're 9 months behind.
Yeah, about 9 months, and then then it, you know, depending on the kind of use, if you had a background vocal or just an instrumental or something like that, you can see some revenue from that. There are a lot of shows, specifically on MTV, I know that don't have music budgets, and they do gratis licensing, which I'm not a fan of, and we won't do any of. But you know, you can still see some performance royalties from that, but you won't see any sort of upfront fees.
Tavi, what are bands missing out on if they don't get these back-end performance royalties? So if they only get the $500 that Greg said, and then that show, we'll just take an MTV show, for example, goes on to play 15 or 20 times with a vocal up performance, what kind of money are they missing out on the different sides?
And that question is so common, I can't even explain how many times bands that I deal with ask. Unfortunately, I can't give a figure because it changes every quarter, because it's based on our license agreement in place with the actual studios and the broadcasters and the users of music. That's what determines our rates and the actual amount per performance, if that wasn't a tongue twister. But what I will say is, as a band and as a creator, you know, some would argue that the goal is to be, you know, the next big band, or you just want to tour stadiums, or you just want to, you know, whatever you want to do. At the end of the day, the goal is to be successful and to be creative and to do it for a living and to actually, you know, be able to focus all your energy and everything you have on this creative product, which is music. And I think that licensing has played, and film and TV licensing in particular, has played such a huge role in affording that opportunity for bands and writers, because it is another revenue stream that can give you the ability to tour, because it's like mailbox money. You don't have to you don't have to be present. You know, your music gets licensed to, you know, as the theme for, you know, Real World, like Road Rules Challenge. Like, you're going to be doing pretty well off of just the frequency of that performance. I mean, think about how many times that show airs. I mean, it's ridiculous how often that show's airing. And that alone is going to afford you, you know, a statement every 3 months that's going to be like, hey, maybe it's gas money, maybe it's rent money. Whatever it is, it's worth you registering and knowing that you're entitled to it. And I think that that's imperative for a writer and a creative to understand what they're entitled to, because in general, everything is going down because it's extremely saturated, or because, you know, ad sales aren't there to just support the actual, like, licensing revenue. That it's just important to diversify. You can't just be, you know, I'm going to sell 1 million records, because people don't sell 1 million records now. Or I'm going to just, you know, tour like crazy because that's going to pay the bills, because it won't do it. So it's important to really know, you know, that there's different ways for you guys to make money.
And so just to tie that up, and I think we've covered it pretty well. So Greg's fee might be a one-time fee on the front end for the sync rights, but the back-end performance that you're dealing with, the songwriter rights and the publisher rights pay out every time one of those songs is aired. Is that right? Okay. And what is the band missing out? I see a lot of bands come to me and they've only registered as a songwriter. They don't have a publishing company set up, or they haven't designated a publishing entity. Can you explain a little bit about what they miss out on if they haven't done that?
Yeah, if you aren't registering the song, collecting both sides, which is the songwriter and the publisher, you're essentially missing out on half of the revenue that you could be making. Now, at BMI, we're unique in that you don't need a publishing company to collect your publishing revenue. You can actually collect it through your songwriter account. However, it's very simple to just create a publishing company, collect both the songwriter share of that particular song and the publisher share on that song. And I think if you don't register it accordingly, it's just as simple as you're missing out on the other half of that. You know, it mirrors each other, where you could be you're only getting 50 when you could be getting 100. Think of it like that. So it's almost like you wouldn't do one without doing the other. It wouldn't make sense.
If you're an artist out there, how do these folks get music into your hands? How do they approach you? What is your favorite way to be approached, and what kind of way do you want to have music in a physical sense, or do you want to see it MP3s, links, emails, that kind of thing?
I'll collect CDs when I leave.
And right now, I seem to be getting just, you know, people really, I really don't get that many CDs as much anymore. A lot of the younger bands are just sending through, you know, links. I'd personally love to get full albums via, like, you send it or we transfer or some other sort of, like, zipped file, and I'll go through all of it. You know, I go through. We do such a wide range of music that like we get every kind of music. So I go through it, and that's basically why I do what I do, is because I'm a music junkie, and I'll listen to everything that comes through. So, but yeah, basically right now it's an introduction email saying, is it cool if I send you this stuff? If someone's like, it's some really good R&B, I'll tell them, like, you know, I'm not really using R&B right now. If you want to hit me back, you know, in 6 months, whatever. But if they're saying I have a singer-songwriter band or whatever, or, you know, just send it through and I'll listen to it. It's that simple, really.
Greg, on a monthly basis, how much music do you get sent? Just ballpark.
I don't even know how to answer that. That's like, how many emails do you get in a month?
Right.
You know, I mean, it's such a huge amount of music, and we're, as you were saying, like, we started off at MTV. I was saying, doing Viva La Bam, and somehow we're doing 16 and Pregnant, and we oversee that show, and Teen Mom 2. So it's 3 separate shows, each show has, 15 episodes a season, and each episode has 70 cues in it.
Really?
Of all independent music.
Wow.
And we're licensing all that stuff. And
Guess I can't do that math.
It's a ton of music. It's ridiculous. And I do have a partner, and we have two assistants, and everyone's going through all this stuff. So, but it's a shitload of music, basically.
Are you using any libraries or stuff like that?
Not really.
No, yeah, wow, that's great. That's a lot of music.
Yeah.
How about you, Bud? When you're working on projects, how do you prefer to be approached?
And it doesn't make a difference. I mean, I think more and more the digital way is a lot more convenient because most of the shows, as Greg was saying, you say a bin. It's that hard drive you provide the editors with digital information. It used to be a rack of CDs, They don't use them anymore. So if the format we get it in is the format that eventually we're going to provide it, it's a lot quicker than having one of my coordinators, take a CD that they got and burn it and then catalog it. And sometimes the CDs don't read because they're indie CDs and iTunes isn't registered, so somebody's got to take. It's a lot easier in the digital format. And yes, reviewing material is really complicated. I mean, the way I do it, we do Californication. That's a user-heavy show. And also very broad. When we start a film in a specific area, we'll go out and search. We just had a conversation before I came here about a movie that I'm doing. Looking in so many directions, it's ridiculous. So there's a lot of music that either myself or my coordinators will divide up and we'll review. And it's pretty much, who sent it to you. I get it from publishers, record labels, independent sources. There's a lot of really good companies who are now representing independent artists as a collective of artists, which really helps us. Because pitching a song is really important. If it's a specific need that you have, and you go ask somebody for some Latin reggae, and you get some not Latin reggae, you get Australian reggae or something. It's just like you kind of go, well, that isn't what I asked for, and you start to get a bit annoyed, and you won't go back to that particular person to ask for stuff. So it's important that things are presented correctly to the people that are asking for things. If it's not your kind of show, or if you think it's your kind of show, you can find us. We're not, impossible to get to. There's sources that can get to us, and then eventually you get to listen to it.
So doing your research, I think, is key. And I'm a seller of music, and they're the users of music, if you will. So that's what Bud was talking about, an example where I come into play, and I work with a lot of variety of different independent labels, and then there are artists on those labels, and the artists, and he'll tell me a project, or people like him will tell me a project. I'm looking for this. If I don't have it, I don't have it. If I do, I try and identify that, picking out of the massive roster that I have the pleasure of representing and identifying the right sort of content. Otherwise, if you're individual artists, do your research and find out the best way to get them the music. And one key thing is, I'm going to guess it drives you crazy, but if you get sent a digital link and then you click on that link and then the track name doesn't pop up or the artist name doesn't pop up, it's out the window, basically. So make sure you have it properly identified in iTunes so that when you send it, it pops up when the person unzips that file.
One thing that aggravates me the most about that is if at the information little box at the bottom of iTunes, if it doesn't have the name and phone number or the email of the person that it came to, and I'll get stuff even from my coordinators where, God, I love this song, let's get it. And they'll go, gee, who sent that to me? So it's as simple as that, and especially in today's digital, is make sure that iTunes helps you. It's embedded there. You can say it's from Fred, and this is my email, this is my phone number, because I don't want to lose that. Oh, sorry.
So put your contact information in the digital
that's the
files
bottom
that you
line.
send, or if you send a physical, definitely include a note. I actually got a physical CD 2 weeks ago. There's no information other than an address from a certain city in California. I still don't know who it was, and it had a couple decent tracks on it. I don't know.
No, I've gotten plenty of those where you put it in, no song titles pop up, and no like return. You just, yeah.
What happens is we ignore it. No matter how cool that song is, with the volume that he's dealing with, next. So you don't want to be ignored.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is it better to have an agent or an unsolicited page, or what are you guys most likely to sort of?
Pay him.
Yeah, exactly.
That or talk to your PRO. What I do is more artist relations, which is dealing with the writers and the bands in facilitating opportunities in whatever capacity it may be. So I think it's imperative to have a really, really strong relationship with your PRO. And if you can't get one, try harder, because at the end of the day, that's what we're there for. We're the beginning. We deal with things at an early place where they maybe don't want to see it yet, but we can be helpful in getting it to the right area to eventually get to that point where when you reach out to one of these guys, it's not going to go unnoticed. Yeah.
They will help you, they help us. There's no question about it. I mean,
I'm sorry,
there
Performing
you
Rights
go.
Organization.
Good question.
Sorry, it's just an acronym.
ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC
Yeah, there's
are
three
the
of them.
three main in the U.S.
Yeah.
they focus.
Sorry. No, sorry.
They focus on the writers, and you as a writer, that's what they're there to help you do, and they're good at it, and they have great staffs, and there's no question that I have good relationships with all of them, because you'll find yourself going, you go in and look, and there's a published song, but you can't find the person. The phone number's 30 years old, and so eventually they'll find you. They'll help you.
Yeah, it's basically in there.
Excuse me?
Can I ask a question related to that? Do you actually represent, do you actually actively promote at BMI? Do you promote, or is the publisher promoting the use of the song?
Well, a publisher will and does as well. It's not something that we're necessarily advertising per se. It's just a way to offer a better service. So I have relationships with my writers or the people that I'm affiliating and working with, or if I see promise or potential and I have a relationship and I think it makes sense, absolutely. I'd be more than happy to say, hey, I got a band, Mike, you should really check them out. They need someone to rep them for film and TV. Or, hey, I know, XY at Chop Shop, and they do these things. You should check this band out because he's fantastic. And then, boom, they take it from there. But, yeah, I can definitely be an entry point to connect the dots.
I see a question right down here. We're going to do some Q&A at the end, but go ahead if it's related to this, please.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank all of you guys for coming, and I thank some of you because I saw you last year, and I really appreciate it that you're here again. My question is, if you're working on a film or a play, for example, and you want to use...
We got to use mics for questions.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for coming twice, some of you, if not all. If you're working on a film or a play and you have no budget and you want to incorporate music in your film or play, what avenues exist, and how can you get good music very inexpensively? And if it's a benefit or a nonprofit, are there even lesser expensive ways to access music for your project in either the theater for the play or the cinema for the film?
I'd say write your own music.
It's, God bless you for trying.
Yeah.
All of us have been in situations where someone has come to us and said, help me. And I relayed an instance earlier, and it's a Santa Barbara filmmaker and somebody that I'm trying to help. It's so hard. And the reason it's hard, and what Greg says, is if you can get somebody in this room to work with you who is looking forward to getting a break in writing material, that's the way to go. Because unfortunately, with the business and what's happened as a business, with the cutbacks at labels and publishers, the word gratis or benefit, or it's fine. And there's a lot of artists who want to help people, but there's still a piece of paper, and there's still somebody that's got to sit there and do this and make a phone call, and they don't have those people anymore. They've let them go. They're out of work. So for them to generate the rights that would have to come to you on something that's recognizable, or, you know, it's just difficult. It's not that some of us constantly get involved in that, and we go, God, this is really good. I got to help them, and you get halfway there, and then you don't finish.
It really comes down to, like you're saying, I mean, if you're going to get involved as a supervisor or someone who knows the business, and basically the term passion project is always the one that's like, I got to have this. And the reason why someone has to have that song is because it's a really good song, and it should be making a bunch of money. And that's where it kind of comes into play with other, people, artists out there, is that it is hard to make that argument that I should be able to use your song for nothing to promote my project when, no one else, I mean, people just don't work for free, and you just can't work for free. And you can't expect artists to give you music for free. And that's where the way I stand at it. And a lot of times, like I said, it's always like, this song is so perfect for my scene, or I have to use this song. It's like, because it's a great song, that's why it's so perfect for the scene, and it has value in that. So.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Carve out your rights if you can just get festival only, and recognize that if you start making money, then you can start paying the music that's used, and working with someone that knows the ins and outs in the business. Then you're going to be able to get some good music for very reasonable prices, or gratis. And there's too many artists that are willing to give their music away for free. But if you can recognize and show that you recognize the value of music, and be that in some sort of carved out way for the project, festival only, Santa Barbara Festival Circuit for 2-year rights, can I get this for gratis, with an option, or just I'll come back to you if a production company or someone, a film distributor, picks us up, then you have another go around to clear that music when hopefully you have a budget.
And also block off a big chunk of time to wait for that paperwork if you ever get it back, because as Bud was saying, the people who are there that would maybe look at that paperwork when it goes into the bottom of the stack, a lot of those people are out of work. So you don't have a lot of people that would really hop on that for like the festival and those kinds of rights. It just takes a while to get back.
I'll stay away from specific names because it's just not good to do. But I've been involved because you get to a stage in your career where you want to help people. And you can. You get involved in doing these things, and the best advice that I've had is to take a filmmaker or a project, whatever environment you're in, network out to find artists that will work with you. And there was a film, last year's Santa Barbara Film Festival, documentary, great documentary. All of it I helped clear, okay? And every one of those artists gave the filmmaker the song, the recordings, the publishing, said, let's just do it and see what happens. He did it himself. They were all local artists. They were people who understood what he was trying to do with the movie. That's what you have to do, because if you take that one step further and say, gee, my uncle knows Jackson Brown, and maybe Jackson will help us. Well, maybe he will, but maybe his record label won't, and I'll give you a specific example. Salvador, early movie I did with Oliver Stone. Jackson Brown, huge fan of the director and of the problems in El Salvador. He would have given it to me. Warner Brothers, sorry, don't give free. And, eventually we had to pay something. He wasn't happy about it, but that's the way it goes. So look to the artists that are in this room. Turn to the person next to you and say, want to write a song for my play? It's my advice.
Thank you.
I want to turn it over to questions, but just one last area I want to cover, because it's a popular question these days, is the issue with representation companies. When you Google music licensing, the first thing that pops up a lot these days are representation companies that are willing to represent you, and you upload your songs and you enter into a contract. Mike, can you talk a little bit about what those are and maybe the pros and cons?
Yeah, I'm one of those companies, a representation licensing company, and I think there's definite pros to being signed up to a reputable licensing company, someone that will have an artist-friendly deal, look out for opportunities in representing your music to people that are users of music and have budgets, preferably, in more cases than not, to then pay for the rights for that music. And then someone that can navigate the territories and finding the right opportunities for your music, knowing the right people to get your music to, and then negotiating the right proper fee that that song is worth. If Gossip Girl wants to use your song, artist that doesn't know any better, that company's not going to take advantage of their artist because that particular company doesn't. But you need to know what that's worth, what the media rights are for, versus some of the shows on MTV, they don't have the budgets, versus some other shows that are somewhere in between, and the various films and the rights that are involved. So a licensing representation company is good to navigate those waters for you if you can find the right fit of a company that responds to your music, that can accurately represent it. And in the last year alone, there's been an increasing amount. It's almost unbelievable how many new people have gotten into that space. On one hand, it's making for a very overcrowded marketplace. On the other hand, there's a lot of music out there, and I certainly have to turn down stuff every day because I've already got a healthy roster, and I want to make sure I'm the right fit for that independent artist to represent for music licensing. So there's a lot of companies out there. It's worth looking into to find the right fit to represent your music.
And
that's it in a nutshell.
yeah, and I think, in addition to that, again, I can be a huge resource for someone. I have it all the time. Bands say, hey, we got hit up by this company. Do you know them? No, I have no idea who they are, and they're shady, so run. If you ask me, hey, do you know Mike Locke? He reached out to me, I'll say he's fantastic. You should talk to him. And I think that it's important for you. Yes, it's important
but still
for
run.
you. Yeah, but still run, exactly. Yeah. It's important for you as creatives to recognize that you are a community. You are a community that honestly is a huge resource for yourselves, whether it be to show trade or to, just educate yourselves on, oh, you dealt with such and such, what was your feedback on them? Or, oh, I can deal with such and such, this person's really great, I'm going to recommend you. Just like we do on a professional side of things. As executives, we're doing the same thing. Oh, you dealt with such, was it a good experience or was it a bad experience? Keep that in mind when you are navigating your careers. Being aware, asking the right questions, going to things like these, building your own network so that you have outlets to go, I want to go now do this, who do I need to contact? Oh, I should contact you, and from you contacting, I'm going to find all these other people. I think it's easy for songwriters and artists in general to forget that, you're networking just like we are. You're just networking among different people and from a different perspective.
Go ahead.
I have a question for you. What do you charge?
I am generally in the range of, I pay out 75% to the independent artist.
And you don't
label.
retain any rights?
No. Although we are encompassing a publishing division of my new company, but we'll act as a publisher as opposed to some of these licensing companies, and be careful of this unless it's warranted, but that are representing your music. Maybe it's a 50-50, mine are more artist-friendly deals where I'm typically in the 25% commission range, paying through 75%, maybe a 30% paying through 70% if it's just one side that I'm representing. But all in, does the artist control master and composition? We'll retain 25% of the upfront fee, pay through 75%. There's a lot of companies that'll be 50-50, and that might be okay, but then there's companies that are 50-50, and of that 50, if they place your song in that film, they might retitle it to the company, and then they're owning the publishing, because maybe you signed something that says, we'll represent you at a 50-50 split, and then if we get it in the MTV show or whatever show, then we own that song. There's a lot of companies, so that's an okay thing that there's more and more companies, but be very careful because there's a lot of shady deals out there. And artists that I know, whether I represent them or not, might say, hey, will you look at this? This company wants to work with me, and I'm desperate for money. They're offering me $1,000 if they place my song, and I'm reading it, and it's saying if they place their song, suddenly they own that recording, suddenly they own that composition. Like, don't sign that. Do not sign that. So be very careful with those companies that might be there to help you as well. There's some sharks out there and some bad ones, but there's a lot of good ones as well.
I was going to add, too, that you definitely don't want to, in my opinion, get in business with the companies that do the retitling, because I think in the next 5 years, I'd say, there's definitely technology to where, the BMIs and ASCAPs of the world are going to be able to know if there are compositions titled under different titles, or, I know some bigger companies, if they know that a certain company they're licensing from has dealt with retitles or something like that, they won't even license from them anymore. Just because it's kind of a legal gray area, I think, as far as who actually owns that composition. If you're just putting a new title on it, but it's still the same composition. So me personally, I would just stay away from those kinds of companies.
Yeah, I'd like to open it up for, thank you so much. I'd like to open it up for a few questions while we have some time. Anyone here have a question for the panel?
Hi. Yeah, I have a question. Just more of the logistics of setting up, if we have to do like our own fictitious business name to set up a publishing company or to get that side, and if you could talk a little bit more about that, and how to contact people and kind of get the ball rolling.
You mean like with like?
Let the lawyer do it.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like-
Why don't we,
can get out of
come
this.
see me afterwards if you want, but basically it would be setting up exactly a company. Like BMI said, they don't necessarily require that, but if you're with ASCAP, for example, if you want to set up a publishing company, you'd have to set it up. You can set it up as a sole proprietorship, but set up your own company. You would have to go through the steps of registering a fictitious business name. It's pretty easy. You go to the courthouse here and set it up. It's not as complicated as you think, but come see me afterwards. If anyone has a question on how to do that side, come see me afterwards because I want to take advantage of their time. But
it's easy.
It can be done, for sure.
Very simple question. You mentioned it's good to send MP3s or an album or something like that, but just in general, is there any sort of industry-wide preference for that, sending MP3s or sending a website with streaming audio? Is there any sort of
Website with streaming audio.
Oh,
I think MP3s are just, they're going to clog my inbox.
okay.
It's a lot, but that's
but
going to be
that's-
different
that's-
for me
yeah.
than it is for someone else.
So it could vary.
I won't open an MP3 that's sent in an email.
You will not? Okay. Viruses and all that.
And
stuff,
I
yeah.
will actually, well, and also, our coordinators are instructed to, if anybody sends it to us, to literally track them down and say, please don't do this, because they, if we get, and we do, we'll get 10 or 15 a day, and it'll crash a server. I mean, and all of a sudden you say, well, who are those people, and I'd like to find them. No, so.
And that is like literally just an MP3 attached to an email sending through, where you're like, what is this coming through? And we tell people not to send those either, but I do get like zipped files, like you send it, so all that kind of stuff. I personally get that, full albums zipped down,
Best way to do it.
and with it you send it, exactly, but never embedded in an email, because that'll just piss everyone off.
Yeah.
But is it filed
No, not
No.
even a zip file and email, because they're still the same size as if it's a WAV file that's been zipped.
It's basically a link. You just do a link through like a link.
streaming links, and there are tons of services, by the way, that don't charge for doing that. I mean, you send it until you get to a really big file. It's free,
But I know, like, and like you were saying, I mean, you do accept files like that, but I do know some other supervisors that don't. They still want CDs. So it really just comes down to, I think, the person.
Preference,
But generally speaking, the users of music, music supervisors get so many emails a day. Do not send an attachment because, they won't get
It's
to
just,
it. They've noted. And send it, and then you send it, link, identify what it is, make sure it's properly labeled, and do your research.
Thanks so much. There's a question back here again.
Hi, I have a question that's sort of both to BMI and to Mike. I, for the last year, have been involved in helping with the estate of a lyricist. So working with his catalog, helping his widow. It's been, what you guys are listening to today, I mean, it's such an incredible learning curve between performance and mechanical and all of the, every time we try to do something, we hit a roadblock. So it's a very difficult business, the business side of the music business. And we are in the process of now moving the catalog to BMI. Basically because it was with SOCAN, which is the Canadian rights organization, and they wouldn't allow his widow to sell one song, all songs, some songs, writer's side share out of the catalog. So it's just, we had to go through all kinds of hoops and things. So one of my questions is, obviously this person is not alive to promote his work. I don't see that it's published. There's standards, so there's songs that are collecting good royalties. So what I'm a little confused on is, would it be worth this person's, with the widow's while, to come to someone like you, Mike, who would, or is BMI going to come? I mean, she's not going to go out and hustle the songs used for commercials or DVD, so it would be worth her to explore having someone like you as well, trying to push the work and get more usage so her royalty streams are coming up. Is that correct?
Yeah. You could put some feelers out and see if there's a representation, a licensing company that could look out for opportunities to license that catalog.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
it's active and earns a lot of money and stuff.
Yeah.
And then just one other little question.
I think, real quick though, I think that's in your best interest actually, to find
Yeah.
someone who really understands that world, who can help negotiate, navigate the world, especially of standards, as you know.
Yeah, well, some of them, I don't know if the publishing, I mean, one song's at Sony, and others at Universal, a bunch
Do
of
you
them.
know the word administration? You understand?
I'm
publishing?
sorry?
You know what publishing administration is?
A little bit, but no, go ahead.
Well, in addition...
I mean, she
in
has
addition-
publishers, I mean, she only owns the lyricist side.
So
The
they're
writers.
all...
So they're
they're
all with different
published.
publishers, one's like, some's at Sony, some's at Universal, some's with the Richmond organization, you know,
Right.
so they're kind of all over, and whether they're, I mean, people just come to Sony and say, can we use this song or can we use that
Right.
song? But I'm just thinking there may be opportunities, because there are a lot of songs that are fallow, that if they're with someone like you.
It's a good idea.
That they're, I mean, I want to keep her earning money. And then the other thing is with the 9-month behind, which we're aware of, and when a catalog gets moved to BMI, is there going to be that lag or not? You probably don't know the answer to that.
What do you mean? Like if those works are being?
I know, like first quarter 11 right now is
Uh-huh.
being distributed right now, November 15th. So when the catalog gets moved out of SOCAN into BMI, she's not going to have to wait 9 months, right?
It might be longer than that.
Yeah.
Moving all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be different because, I mean, if you think about it, it's 9 months behind, and if you're pulling the catalog, I don't know. I'd have to talk to you about that and figure out exactly when you're pulling all the works over. What's the that's the
SOCAM
side
didn't have a
conversation.
relationship with BMI or ASCAP here to collect?
Yeah, I don't understand that. That's why I also want to.
Probably did.
Because we have reciprocal agreements with all foreign territories, so that doesn't, I don't really, well, we can talk about it. Yeah, definitely.
Hey, thanks so much. Any other questions? I see some hands here.
Okay. Just as far as like the recording quality that you might receive for somebody trying to get onto a movie or TV or whatever, will you deal with something that's not at your level and have them re-record it? I'm working with somebody who's got things good enough for CD Baby, but apparently not good enough for Amazon or Pandora at the moment. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah.
I never heard that.
Yeah. I mean, really, you just.
I'm sorry. I was just there.
Hey, you basically don't. I wouldn't say send through anything that you're not happy to represent and say like, this is a great recording and here's the song. I wouldn't send through demos or anything like that. It should be CD quality or release quality, as happy as you should be with it.
Amazon's turning stuff down. Frightening.
Yeah.
Some of the things that I've used, in top quality, film, theatrical stuff have been demos off of GarageBand. It's all, for me, it's all about the music. The quality. Fortunately, we have the technology to fix everything. So, I mean, if you get me a great song and it works, I'll be calling you and figuring out how to fix it. So I wouldn't be afraid of it.
We've got the two best questions. I got time for two more. In the back. Can we wait for the mic? Hang on just a second. Thanks.
Has anybody gone as far, let's say, on a TV series to send you a clip of the series with their song embedded in it, just to show you how it would work? Does that do anything for you, or you just want to hear the music?
Rarely go that far, and Greg can talk further. I mean, the time frame for us usually is pretty quick. So, to provide you with pieces of material, sometimes it's difficult for us to do. So, how something works is not usually a collaborative basis with an artist unless on a longer range film, you have enough time that you actually get in the studio with the artist and you show them what it is and they go back and forth, but not on a general basis.
Yeah, no, I mean, what you might also think is good for a scene may not, we may not think, or the director or whatever. So it's really hearing the song and finding a place for it if it ever works. I mean, I will say one cool thing that think it was the bassist of Interpol did, is he wanted to become a composer. So he went and took clips from movies that he liked and always wanted to score, and did his own score to them, and that was his reel that he sent around to get gigs. And I thought that was kind of a cool way to do a demo reel and send it around and show people what he could do.
As a basic composer, that's an excellent idea to do.
If something happens more organically, I think music supervisors like to kind of feel a sense of finding the song, or many do anyway, or identifying that song for the scene and then getting all the clearances they need. Rather than maybe someone just forcing it into a scene and sending it to them, this is how it can be used. I think it's fine just to send the song. However, on sort of more an organic side, fans of music sometimes do that and put stuff up, and it might be worth calling attention to. Fans of one artist I work with found one of their songs and did their own trailer to an HBO trailer of Game of Thrones, but subbed in this artist's song. And so I'm looping in the promo department of HBO about that use. I mean, it just sort of happened from fans of the band, and I'd love to license that for an actual HBO promo. So we'll see.
Cool.
We have time for one last question right here.
Hi. I was wondering, for digital releases or even for physical releases, if you recommend registering with Harry Fox or Sound Exchange or any of those companies after you've registered your songs with the PROs?
Yeah, Harry Fox and Sound Exchange do different things. Harry Fox is important when you're an independent and you don't have a label that actually would normally serve collecting that mechanical, because the Harry Fox agency collects the mechanical royalty, what we were talking about earlier. And Sound Exchange actually is completely different in that it represents the sound recording, which and by way of the artist actually, which is totally different than what I do, and it representing just the writer and the music publisher, and it's not necessarily the artist. So I would say it couldn't hurt. Sound Exchange is reputable, Harry Fox is reputable. They're all collecting and distributing different things, and I guess that's just as complicated as the industry is. There's various revenue streams. So yeah, I would.
Yeah, so to be clear, yeah, if you want to be signed up or affiliated with a PRO, BMI, ASCAP,
Yeah.
CSAC, BMI is an excellent one, and Sound Exchange, and various countries have different laws and regulations, but Sound Exchange tracks and the performances of the actual recording.
Right.
So Tavi is not involved in that world. She's involved in the compositions. You're played on radio. You get performance fees
royalty, yeah.
from that by being played on the radio, but if your recording gets nothing, the label gets nothing from the plays that song gets on the radio. But you own your own recording, and for digital sites streaming your music, there's certain laws now that you can get paid on that recording side as well, and Sound Exchange tracks that, so yes, not a bad thing to sign
Yeah,
up for.
definitely.
Great answer.
Well, let's give a round of applause to our great panel here. Thank you, John. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back in this room for a touring panel with, among other esteemed guests, Kevin Lyman, founder of the Warped Tour. There's also mentoring sessions over here in this room for another hour.
Hey, Matt, how's it going? Steve Knows.
How you doing?
Good, good.
You covering, or you're here just learning?
No.